My guest today is a member of the Columbia University College of Physicians and Surgeons, and in 2009 he became the youngest member to run an independent research laboratory. He's published more than 20 peer-reviewed articles since. He's often quoted on matters related to obesity, which is how I learned about him. Now, please remember, 10 words is a goal, not a rule, so please, no counting at home. And besides, it's not so easy. Let's see you do it. So, please begin by telling us, spelling for me, your first, and I want to tell you one other thing. What I'm going to do here is we're going to go through this list of questions. I'm going to take notes, and this video version of the interview will be posted immediately to my YouTube channel. You can share that wherever you want. But in addition, I will do a printed transcript, and for the printed one, I will do some editing of your comments. I will remove some questions and answers, and I may move some around to help the flow. But I will send you a copy exactly as it would appear for you to be sure that I haven't done anything out of context or anything, so you'll be able to have a voice in how the printed version appears, and then I will post that to my blog as well. Is that all acceptable and understood?
Yep, sounds great.
Great. Okay, so finally, please spell your first and last names for me.
Sure. It's Christopher, C-H-R-I-S-T-O-P-H-E-R, Ochner, O-C-H-N-E-R, and I was born October 23rd, 1976.
In Pompton Plains, New Jersey.
Pompton Plains, New Jersey, you got it.
Right, which I knew because I read your CV. You don't have to be specific about this, of course, but where do you live now?
Now I live in New Jersey, northern New Jersey, right outside of Manhattan.
And what is your occupation?
I am a research scientist on obesity and nutrition.
So when you were born, October 23rd, 1976, was there anything notable about the circumstances? There doesn't have to be, of course, but I've had some pretty interesting answers. Was Elvis in the next bed, or were you born, 19 weeks premature, or anything like that?
The only story I was told is that the doctor who delivered me noted how long my eyelashes were.
Excellent. Excellent. I had somebody else tell me that she was born in November '63, and her doctor had just attended to Jackie Kennedy.
Well, that one's much cooler than my eyelashes.
So, again, not to violate your privacy, but in general terms, what's your family status?
I am single, but in a relationship with a wonderful woman in Manhattan, and loving traditional Catholic Italian family.
Awesome. Tell me, did you have an early ambition?
Originally, I really liked arguing, so I thought maybe being a lawyer would be a good idea, but instead I chose the only profession that has a tougher rate of finding a job right now.
I did not know that. So doctors and lawyers have the most difficulty finding jobs?
From what I was told, is that the largest increase in food stamp usage in the last 5 years has been amongst research PhDs.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's over.
So, fair to say you're not...
I'm not one of those, fortunately.
You're not one of those. Well, good. I'm glad to hear that. Tell me, when you were younger, someone outside your family who impressed you?
I've had two mentors, both of whom were clinical mentors. My PhD is actually clinical. I had two clinical mentors, one during my doctorate and one during my clinical internship, who were just really, really solid, good human beings.
Well, I asked for one. You want to pick one? Like one of your two children?
Sure. Would be, I can spell it for you, would be John Spahowski from Philadelphia. He was in private practice, a psychologist.
Why don't you spell it for me, please?
Or it's John, like normal John, J-O-H-N. Spychalski, S-P-Y-C-H-A-L-S-K-Y. Sorry, John, if that's wrong. Pretty sure it's Y.
I will hunt him down, not to bother him, but to look on the internet to make sure that it's spelled right. But I'm going to say it back to you: Spychalsky.
That sounds right.
Okay, that's just how I would have guessed. So he was a. That's not true. He was a psychologist in private practice in Philadelphia. Did I get that right?
Correct.
Okay. Something that the people who you work with would be surprised to learn about you.
I go to Mass and pray the Rosary every week.
I missed one of those words, and I pray the Rosary every
week, every Sunday.
What's the worst overweight you've ever experienced personally?
My heaviest weight?
Yeah.
Not very. Maybe 165 pounds. Too much pizza in college.
Okay, well now, ordinarily I wouldn't ask, but for reference, what do you weigh now?
About 150.
Okay. Tell me, if there are any, is there a food rule that you follow for yourself?
Yes. I am not allowed to have chocolate or ice cream in my house. Not that I don't eat them, I'm just not allowed to have them because then I would eat the whole thing right away. But otherwise, I'm not a huge believer in hard and fast rules.
I think I may have missed one word. I just want to be sure. Otherwise, I'm not a huge believer in hard and fast rules.
Right.
Okay, then I didn't miss a word. Okay. Tell me, what would you say is your greatest bias in treating obesity? Well, I heard you say you're a researcher. In your approach to obesity, your greatest bias?
My greatest bias? Probably that I believe I'm a reductionist. So I believe everything essentially comes down to ones and zeros for neurochemicals in the brain.
Chemistry in the. I'm sorry.
You got
probably
it.
That I believe that I'm a reductionist. I believe everything comes down to chemistry in the brain, to ones and zeros.
Ones and zeros is a reference towards a Turing machine. It's an old sort of philosophical reference that essentially man is reducible to the most simplest neural impulses, which are basically ones and zeros.
Huh. Is there a promising trend that you have noted in obesity treatment?
I'm hesitant to call it promising, but there is some indication that obesity is at least starting to level off in adults, and some U.S. states have shown a slight reduction in very young children. So I'm not celebrating yet, but it's better than rates just going up and up and up.
Okay. How about a voice on obesity whom you admire or agree with? Or both?
One?
Well, please.
Dr. Eric Stice, S-T-I-C-E.
I know Eric. Really? Okay.
Yeah, he's a good friend and very well-respected colleague.
Oregon Research Institute, is that right?
Oregon Research Institute, exactly.
Tell me, and I'm sorry. Uh, Tell me. You gave a sentence or two about him. A good friend and influential,
Oh,
whatever you said. Say it again.
well-respected colleague. The reason is really he's outstandingly prolific, but still makes time for family and hobbies.
Excellent. Tell me an interesting fact, a fact interesting to you about binge eating.
I find it interesting that it's not binge eating per se, but people assume that people who binge and purge, right, or people with an eating disorder, are thin, and that's not necessarily the case. Most bulimics are actually slightly overweight. It shows that binging, purging, not only problematic, but not necessarily even effective for what they're trying to use it for.
So, would you say there are any unhealthy foods?
There are lots of unhealthy foods. The most unhealthy are those laden with sugar, added sugar, and trans fats.
Okay. Can some foods... Based on something I read, I thought you might answer differently, so I'm going to skip over that question, I think. How much nutrition instruction did you get in med school?
Actually, I have a PhD, so I never went to med school. But in terms of coursework during my doctorate,
Yep.
very little specific to nutrition.
Sorry for that. Sorry for that error.
Oh, it's okay.
Okay.
But I have several friends who are physicians, and they report the same thing. It used to be a couple of days. Now I think it's a week or 2 weeks. But overall, not enough in either instance.
Are you familiar with the Yale Food Addiction Scale?
Yes.
What's your opinion? What's your opinion of it?
It's great. I wish I'd thought of it. If you're asking me about my opinion of food addiction overall, I've spoken on this very controversial and very interesting topic.
Yes.
I believe that in the way most people conceptualize addiction, food could be an addictive substance.
Okay. You were quoted as saying, this was in a Nevada newspaper, I think, if we cut 20 or 30 calories out of our diet per day, that's like 3 potato chips, we wouldn't have an obesity problem. Were you quoted accurately when you said that? Or when you were quoted saying that?
Yes, I was quoted accurately. There is a little bit more to that, and that's all else being equal. So that means if people didn't compensate for those 3 less potato chips, then either eating more or moving less. But the obesity epidemic is not a result of massive binge eating, but progressive passive overconsumption.
Okay. I'd like to ask you about something else I think was in the same story. You referred to Overeaters Anonymous. Just for people listening in, Overeaters Anonymous is one of 8 groups that use the 12 that I'm aware of that use the 12 steps to try to get at eating issues of some sort. There's Anorexics and Bulimics Anonymous. There's Food Addicts and Recovery Anonymous. There's Gray Sheeters Anonymous, and a few others. But the quote specifically, again, you can correct me if it wasn't accurate. OA is no magic bullet. Quote, it's about as good as any other relatively successful commercial diet program. That's to say, not very, at least in the long term. We can get almost anyone to lose what we call a medically significant amount of weight. That's between 5 and 10% of initial body weight. We can only get about 2% of those individuals to keep it off. Narcotics Anonymous and Gamblers Anonymous, these are so wildly successful. So why isn't this on a par? Here's the reason. You can't quit food. So is that yes?
Yep.
Okay, good. Thank you. Now, I'd like to know where I've looked for studies that talk about the effectiveness of OA and haven't found any. So could you help me by pointing me to the research you were talking about?
Sure. So most, I can actually send you reference afterwards, but almost every diet out there, we used to call it the dodo bird finding, and it was similar with psychotherapy, but almost every commercial diet out there is successful in the short term. And that includes Atkins, all the way up through low fat, low carb, low glycemic. Most of these are effective in getting people to lose about 5, if you're really lucky, 10% of initial body weight. The problem is the weight almost always comes back.
Okay, but you had compared OA, and I don't know, you correct me. I assume maybe it's true for the other blank A's that use the 12 steps for around food issues, that they're about as good as any relatively successful commercial diet program. So where did you get data that talked about OA or any of the other programs?
Well, I have to look for the reference for OA specifically, but it's sort of well known in the field. I mean, there's a zillion references studying the effectiveness of things like I talked about, Jenny Craig or Atkins or low glycemic or any of these other, we call them lifestyle change diets, which are basically founded on the concept of limiting caloric intake and increasing energy expenditure, physical activity, basically. I don't want to say they're all the same, but they are based on the same premise.
Okay, and for people who are watching either live or later on, I will put some reference in the notes to the show that point to this research when Dr. Ochner gets to send it to me. One other thing that I wanted to ask you about. Do you agree that the answer for most people is not putting people in, quote, dietary jail, but that forever cutting out favorite foods is a bad idea?
Very, very much. The only diet that we know that people can stick to is the American diet. Right, so that teaches us that people are going to eat the foods they love to eat. So the trick is not cutting out the foods that we love to eat, finding a way to make the foods we love to eat better for us.
Okay. Tell me, what is something that needs to change?
The environment, the food environment. You can't throw a rock in Manhattan without hitting McDonald's or a Starbucks. So temptation is everywhere, and we're built, biologically speaking, to survive starvation. which means we store as much excess energy, calories, as we possibly can.
Tell me you're something you enjoy, but something you're a little sheepish about enjoying. Not necessarily food, anything.
Probably, I would say driving cars quickly.
Do you own a car?
I do.
Mind saying what kind?
I have a Porsche.
Yes, so I see that those two things seem related. How would you define sustainability? I mentioned earlier when we were talking that I have an interest in that too. Please tell me, how would you define sustainability?
That's a great question. I would define it as the ability for most individuals to maintain a given behavior.
I'm sorry, it got a little fuzzy. To make blank.
The ability for most individuals to maintain a particular behavior.
Okay, it's a very open-ended question. Most of these are, but that definition would allow people to maintain behaviors that aren't likely to sustain them. The ability,
that aren't likely to. Do you mean are?
The ability for most individuals to maintain a particular behavior. Well, the particular behavior could be cutting, for example. That's just the first one that came to my mind. If they have the ability to keep on cutting themselves, that wouldn't necessarily be sustaining.
So that's a different way of looking at sustaining. To me, I don't look at sustaining as a positive or negative. I just look at it as the ability for it to have longevity, whether it be positive, negative, or neutral. So sustaining to me is more a reference to time.
Okay.
And something that is bolstering.
Okay. So how do you sustain yourself?
That would be in terms of how do I keep myself going. That's sort of the positive connotation of sustenance.
Okay.
Which is, I'm very particular about my diet and physical activity habits.
What do you like to do for physical activity?
Anything competitive, but I am regularly in the gym, so I will do aerobic and anaerobic, so weights plus cycling.
I missed the word again. Between weight and cycling?
Oh, wait, yeah. So I just anaerobic, so weights plus either cycling or Stairmaster or something like that. I used to run, but it's too hard on the joints. I'm getting up there.
Yeah, don't try that with me, pal. I got 20 years on you. It's odd. This is apropos of nothing, but I was my top weight was 365, and there were decades where I really didn't do any activity, and I started jogging. I'm never going to be a runner, but I started jogging in my 50s, and can't figure out if the abuse I did on my body means that I will have done the same amount of damage to my joints that somebody would have done just by doing regular exercise at much less strain on their joints, or whether I get to have 10 or 15 years of abuse on my joints the way other people did earlier in their lives because I didn't start until too late. I don't know the answer to that yet, but so far I'm still running. Jogging.
Good. Well, genetics, like everything else, has a large determinant here.
Yeah, I hear you. So, last question. What's the one thing you wish everybody would just get right?
Everybody would just get right?
Yeah.
Understanding that obesity is maintained by biological factors It's not a lifestyle choice.
Well, that's a very interesting statement, and I'm interested to hear you say it. Dr. Ochner, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
I hope it was good for you. As I said, I will edit as I will. You'll have an opportunity to comment about it, and then I will post something on the on my blog in addition to posting this this video. Thanks for your time. Just to say to everyone watching, the legions of people who are watching, thank you very much for tuning in. And if you're interested in Fat Boy Thin Man or in the It Matters workbook, you can drop me a line. Contact information is at my website, michaelprager.com. Thanks very much, and good day.